Amy Voorhees faced a big seasonal switcheroo when she and husband Selwyn Notelevitz traded Boston for Austin.
In Boston, the way you know whether or not a designer is worth their salt is how their garden looks in the winter when it's so bleak. And because it can't just be about bloom, it has to be about form and structure. And moving to Austin, I realized that August was the new February, that everything is blasted with heat and drought, and that's what you have to design for. And if your garden looks good in the peak of the summer, that's how you know it's really a successful space.
She started by overhauling the forbidding courtyard's columns in favor of inside-out kinship.
So we had to really reconfigure the space or reimagine how to make it welcoming, because this is our primary entrance. We're walking by this garden multiple times a day, and you want it to be beautiful.
Amy made a clean sweep of overgrown and rather forlorn plants.
You knew it wasn't successful because you didn't have any birds or butterflies or bees. It just was completely static. And what I wanted to do was not just make this a beautiful space for people, because it had to be beautiful in Four Seasons because it's the center of the house, but also a welcoming space for wildlife.
She strengthened the narrow rectangle with a series of welded steel raised beds. Betsy Clemens from Dig Austin handled the installation, including concrete underneath to support the weight. Decomposed granite flooring packs down for easy mobility to savor and tend the water-thrifty plants that abound after just 1 year.
I designed it for not just how it would look, that's what people think of first with a garden is bloom, but also for fragrance, for sound, because we have a fountain, so there's running water, so there's always something that is going to touch your senses when you're walking through this space. You can tell I'm a garden-oriented person because we did this big house renovation, but the first thing we did was the garden. And most people, that's the last thing. They have a little money left over, they'll do landscaping.
To elegantly promote the vertical plane, she planted steel trellises with star jasmine and crossvine. Even from indoors, she and Selwyn watch the wildlife that call on them.
And I pulled it out because I wanted it to be able to get water, whenever it rains, I wanted natural water there. And I wanted to be able to access from behind the back. You need to be able to always maintain a garden. You need space behind, between beds, always have paths. So this has ample space behind it. And then also, a nice benefit is that that's a western wall. It's a wall that gets western sun, which is the hottest sun. So I wanted a garden there to help screen those walls from the heat of the midday sun in the summer. I designed this scrim here because I wanted to pick up the sort of the edgy mid-century lines of the house and bring the geometry of the house right out into this central courtyard space. Everything is asymmetrical, like each wall is a different size. It was sort of a quirky space. So I felt like by giving it a strong, linear, regular grid, it would pull it all together.
Amy banished the former gate that jailed the courtyard. To further promote a more congenial front door escort, she added a gently tucked-in fountain.
This is just a recirculating fountain. You just have to plug it in. I love those little recirculating fountains. It's so nice to have water in a garden. This used to just be a pass-through space. People would walk through it to get to the front door. And then all of a sudden we found we were all lingering here. We were having drinks, we'd have a glass of wine, we'd sit out here and enjoy this spot because it's become in some ways an outdoor living room for us.
In front, she ramped up the outdated grounds. In its first season, her choices promised dense coverage in a year or so.
This house was built in the 50s, and I think a lot of the landscaping dated back to then, so it was overgrown, and it was whatever was popular and inexpensive at that time. But we did have some huge assets with these beautiful live oak trees and the mesquite tree. I took out the grass, and I added a lot of wonderful native plants.
She moved the hodgepodge cycads into a standout cluster, framed by cast iron plants, boxwood, and a flowering Anacacho orchid tree.
I went from having this sort of yard that had a lot of polka dots of plants, and now, as my neighbor says, I have a primordial forest on one side because we pulled it all together into an organized space.
Amy clustered Dazzlerion berlandieri for impact.
The color is great. So to have that play in the foliage, and then also the beautiful architectural shapes. You get those nice spiky shapes, and when it contrasts against the formality of a hedge, it adds a certain zing that you wouldn't have if it were just all by itself. I like plants that work really hard in your garden. The main motto when I do my design is I want to create peaceful, practical spaces and honor the local culture. And that's what I set about doing here. I wanted this garden to always be a welcoming garden for the senses, and I didn't want it to require a whole lot of work.